So we filmed that last section about going a little bit deeper into the diagnosis of PMDD and then her experience with psychosis and the manic episode from that, the SSRI from the diagnosis. But my phone ran out of storage, so we are on a different phone right now. We're going to do a brief summary over that, and I'm also going to be typing all of this up as well, so there's going to be in-depth information on the handout as well. But I'm just going to go over what I have for you and let me know if there's anything specific that I missed there. But like I said, you mentioned you were diagnosed with PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which was diagnosed by your primary care, and they gave you an SSRI, which helped you, it sounds like, with the depressive phases.
Yeah.
But when it was kind of going, it sounds like it was more hypomania, but because of that, it made it more like a manic episode. Like, wow. So, yeah, that is. So then she talked about how once it kind of hit that really intense manic episode, and it doesn't sound like the time frame was a little blurry, so you can't quite place it. Is that correct?
Yeah.
It was senior year of high school, around there.
Yes.
And then there was like a period of psychosis. Also, do you know how long the psychosis period was? If that might be really tough to place.
Not super long. I remember it being like probably from like midday to like, then I woke up the next morning and I was fine. So I was like, okay, cool. I'm just like recovering.
Gotcha.
So probably like half a day.
Okay,
Yeah.
and that was like one of the experiences of that.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, and so you mentioned depersonalization, feeling as though you weren't in your, you were like trapped in your own body.
Yes.
Type thing. And like that your parents were not necessarily your parents, like that kind of emotion, and your house wasn't really your house. It was all like a setup, like the Truman Show. Gotcha. So, and then we transitioned into what was the period like when you were getting off of those meds, the SSRIs. It wasn't necessarily the psychosis and that experience specifically that made you decide to get off. It was about a year later.
Maybe not a year. I think that might have been a little bit of an over-exaggeration. I think it was a couple months, I want to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So then you got off the SSRI. Did you feel like a noticeable difference?
Yeah, I would say it wasn't like super immediate, but I definitely like went back into like my old habits, which was something that was like a little bit more familiar, because I hadn't been medicated before and I hadn't been medicated for long. So it was just like, okay, we're back to square one again. Like, this is normal. Like, this is what I'm used to.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
And by that point, you mentioned that no one at this point, in high school was like, they didn't obviously diagnose you with bipolar disorder at this point. So when you mentioned old habits, how did you interpret that? Was that like, oh, the highs and lows, like you had that kind of framework in your mind?
Yeah, it was back to like, I guess maybe not habits was probably not the right word, but just like, it was back to, having the really low lows and then just like feeling either kind of normal or like more productive than normal and being like, cool, I can do anything, and a little bit more energized, and then falling back into that like depressive state.
Gotcha. Going off of that, I'm curious to know, like, people close to you, specifically your family, because I know that when we were in our senior year, we weren't really going to school. So I'm wondering during that period, and really before that, were people ever like, did anyone ever notice, like, if there was that change from depressive to hypomania? Do you remember any times where someone's mentioned that?
Yeah, actually, my sister was the first one to guess that I had bipolar.
Wow.
She always used to say that growing up. She was like, I think you're bipolar. all the time, and like which fascinates me because she's not really a psychology person.
Okay.
But she could really detect how aggressive my mood swings were, even if they weren't super like noticeable to everyone else. But my sister is also very emotionally in tune, so that does make sense. And then that's actually kind of more back to the PMDD diagnosis. Is my primary care doctor was actually like acquaintances or friends with my mom, and my mom had expressed concern that she thought I had PMDD to that doctor because of she saw my mood swings and she just thought that they correlated well with my periods. But I wasn't super, like, you know, I wasn't tracking my periods, and I wasn't really telling her when I was having those mood swings. She just kind of like they just somehow aligned pretty well. And so that was how we actually came to the conclusion of PMDD the first time.
Gotcha. Okay. Wow. Okay. I'm gonna go back to the psychosis just to summarize this.
Yeah.
So I have written down here. So there was like the psychosis period, and then a couple months later you got off those meds. Is there that period between psychosis and getting off the meds that you had another, like a bad manic episode? Not necessarily psychosis.
So like the one in February that I was telling you about with like the whole elopement ordeal.
Actually, could you explain that? I'm sorry to make you explain this again.
No, it's like it's one of those things that's like, dang. Dang.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically what happened was at the time I was having issues like at home, and like, you know, especially with COVID, being trapped with your parents 24/7 doesn't really bode well for relationships. So at the time we were having a lot of issues, and when I went manic, instead of trying to like resolve those issues in maybe a more healthy manner, my go-to solution was trying to convince my boyfriend at the time to get eloped so that I could emancipate from my parents, even though I was already 18, so I really didn't need to. But in my head, I was like, I need to be as separated from them as possible. And so that was the only solution, was doing that. The only solution. There was no other way out. And I was like, it's the easiest because you're right here, you're committed, I'm committed. Maybe not for long, considering we're not still together, but, you know.
That'll happen. I'm curious how he reacted to that.
He was like kind of on board, which was not good either. It really fueled my fire, I'll tell you. I was like, yeah, you want to do this too? I really wish he would have been like, no, you're crazy right now, because that would have been the reality check that I needed. I mean, he was nice about it. He was like, I don't know, maybe. And I was like, but you should do it, because, you know, I was a little out of it. And then at one point, he was like, yeah, like, I'll start talking to my parents about it. And, like, and it's very embarrassing to think about. But, yeah, he, like, was genuinely considering it.
Wow.
What can I say?
The
manic charm was working.
Wow. I'm, like, kind of like, wow. This is a whole documentary can be made just about that.
Just this story.
Yeah. So I'm having kind of trouble picking out what to follow, but that's a great story right there.
Isn't it?
What I do want you to hit on again is that kind of the emotion that you were experiencing in that manic state, correct?
Yeah.
Like, it felt like you weren't doing things that you would normally consider doing.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.